Hello and welcome to Trinity Bible Media. In the last video, we kicked off our Introduction to Genesis series. As it stands now, we have about 20 or so episodes planned, but the problem is every time I start digging into a topic, I wind up falling down another rabbit hole and adding a new episode to the schedule. That said, we don't really have a deadline, so let's just enjoy the ride. There's some really good stuff in store. So today, we'll begin to look at the question of authorship. Now, if you attend Trinity or any other Bible-believing church, you already know that Moses was the principal human author of the first 5 books of the Bible. And the next couple of videos in this series will provide reasons why we can be confident in that knowledge. But just like everything else in the world, not everyone agrees with that. In fact, Mosaic authorship has been under fire for the better part of 200 years. As is normally the case with this sort of thing, the conflict primarily plays out in our colleges and universities. From there, its effects ripple throughout the rest of the world. We'll get into what that looks like and why it's such a big deal in just a few minutes. But first, I'm going to talk about the collateral damage that is suffered in the lives and testimonies of our young people who go off to these places. Let me give you a quick scenario that occurs way too often these days. Okay, imagine you're 18 years old, you grew up in church, you've just graduated high school, and now you're headed off to college. You're typical of most Christians in that you've always just taken it for granted that Moses wrote Genesis. You've never even thought of questioning that idea because it's the sort of thing that everybody just knows. So it's early in the semester, you're getting your being away from home legs under you, and you walk into a course on religion or Old Testament studies or perhaps even ancient history. And then the professor confidently explains to the class that we don't really know who wrote Genesis. But we do know it wasn't Moses. In fact, he probably wasn't even a real person. No, Genesis is the product of a 400-year process where several documents from different schools of thought were all merged together. He then provides a series of arguments supporting his claims, each of which feature passages from the Bible itself. How do you respond to that? Well, you have no response. Your classmates have no response. None of you are equipped for that. And you're far away from home and far away from a reasonable explanation. And then you begin to question other things that you've been taught. Again, Moses is the author of Genesis is one of those things everyone just knows. And if that's not true, if every Sunday school teacher that you've ever had was wrong about something like that, then what else are they wrong about? The seeds have been planted. You begin to wonder what other naive beliefs are in that head of yours. And then there's the very real possibility that soon faith will be replaced by disbelief. Now, this is not some weird edge case what-if scenario. This chain of events happens all the time in college campuses all over the world. In fact, many of today's most notorious atheists actually grew up in church, where they acquired an inadequate understanding of what the Bible teaches. Richard Dawkins, Bart Ehrman, Daniel Dennett, I could name a whole bunch more. These are all very prominent best-selling authors who grew up going to church. But when they were faced with challenging questions or began to ask deeper questions themselves, they had no solid foundation on which to build. So they not only walked away from the Christian faith, but they turned around and attacked it with religious fervor. I've also seen the same sort of thing in my own personal relationships. Over the years, I've known a lot of people who didn't believe in God, and some who were openly hostile toward Him. And like the 3 men I just mentioned, virtually all of them grew up going to church. In fact, some of them went to church longer than I've been going myself. But when we talked about Christ, or about the Bible, or about the basic tenets of Christianity, they all held very shallow, overly simplistic understandings of Christian beliefs. Even when they knew the right thing to say, it seemed to be much more like rote memorization than true knowledge, like a parrot repeating what it's heard. The one feature that all of their stories seem to have in common is that they thought it was enough to know that something is true without regard as to why it is true, without ever connecting different topics or ideas together, without ever being exposed to opposing arguments, without ever being challenged. They may have believed some of the right things, at least to some extent, but their knowledge had no depth. So when they were faced with ideas that rattled their cages, they became confused, and then they rebelled against the church and ultimately against Christ. That's why it's important for us to know not only what we believe, but why we believe it. And we have to make sure that what we believe is the truth, not some corrupt, caricaturized version of the truth. That's why it's important for you, your children, your friends, and your classes and congregations to have an informed understanding of this issue and those like it. Hear me now. I'm not saying that we all need to run off to seminary and earn doctoral degrees in theology. What I'm saying is that we all need to take some time to have some level of familiarity with topics of this nature. But it doesn't end there. There's another reason why Mosaic authorship is so important. This one's at the broader societal level, at the cultural level. If you roll back the clock just a few years and ask the random person, at least in the Western world, what their most basic ethical beliefs are, they'll say things like, don't lie, don't steal, don't hurt people, things of that nature. But we didn't just all conjure up those values on our own. No, they came from somewhere. Ultimately, they come from the Ten Commandments and the rest of the Old Testament law found in the first 5 books of the Bible. Since Moses is the one who received the revelation from God and then wrote that revelation down in those books, it's often referred to as the Mosaic Law. But of course, the Mosaic Law covers more than just lying and stealing. If that were the extent of it, no one would be threatened. And so no one would have a problem with it. After all, who would say that lying and stealing are good things? No, the Mosaic Law has a lot to say about things like the exclusive worship of the one true God, divine authority, human responsibility, human sexuality, the sanctity of marriage, and the sanctity of human life, all human life. Now, those are things that people do care about very deeply. And those are things that people want to be able to decide for themselves without anybody judging them. And most Western societies have always more or less prescribed laws and policies that were consistent with the Bible. For example, the American tax code has historically been designed to encourage things like traditional marriage, raising children, and the concept of the nuclear family, all of which, by the way, are vital to a stable society. In a similar manner, until Roe v. Wade in 1973, the national government of the United States recognized the sanctity of human life and passed laws accordingly. But now, those values are being attacked from every conceivable direction, in the various legislative bodies, in the courts, in classrooms, from the university level all the way down to preschool, in social media, in popular culture, everywhere. Marriage is no longer two people becoming one flesh. It's more or less a business transaction between two parties. Premarital or even extramarital sex is celebrated as a recreational sport. Even something as self-evident as our God-given innate distinctions between he and she has become a matter of personal preference. And of course, certain behaviors that were once unspeakable are now beginning to be legitimized. To say that this trajectory is disturbing is an understatement. Now, you may be asking, why is this relevant to Mosaic authorship? Well, it boils down to the ultimate source and the ultimate authority of that system of values, the Bible, and the Mosaic books in particular. You see, if a person can be convinced that Genesis through Deuteronomy are not what they're purported to be, if that person believes that those books were written by a variety of anonymous committees over a span of 400 years, what do you think that person believes about their authority? Are they really the Word of God? If not, why do we give them so much influence? Why do we live our lives and pass our laws in accordance with them? Perhaps we should create a new morality that's not based on outdated 3-year-old ideas. Or perhaps we should have no morality at all. After all, there's no transcendent God, no creator of the universe. Who has the right to tell us what we should or should not do? Who has the authority to define good and evil? In other words, and I say this without the least bit of exaggeration, we're talking about the very foundation of our culture. Make no mistake, the Western world was founded on a Judeo-Christian system of values. And if you remove the authority of that foundation, our culture finds itself with no foundation at all, no compass to point us in the right direction. The consequences are confusion and disaster. All of that to say, this is an important topic, and it's something with which we all need to have some level of understanding. And next time, we'll dig into the text and begin to look at why we can be sure that Moses was the principal author of the book of Genesis and the rest of the Pentateuch. Between now and then, may God bless you.